And another thing we wanted to cover, I think, in this section, and we can have a bit of a debate about this. Warren, Google has made some changes, hasn't it, to both the frequency with which you need to update apps and also to the apps that you're going to be able to take advantage of accessibility permissions.
It's a huge thing. And, Google started talking about this thing either back in 2017 or 2018. There was such a backlash from, the community, most especially from developers. We don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. We want access. Now, in reality, why are we talking about this? Because if you're making something or taking advantage of the accessibility access, the whole idea is to provide people who have disabilities, for my knucklehead who is blind, or, some other person has some dexterity issues or some hearing issues. So apps that have access to that is intended to make things easier for us. But if you're writing like a note-taking app and you want access to accessibility, that's clearly an abuse of that service. So I am with Google on this one because there's no need having all of these people taking advantage of that. And what that means is that when you do that, it has access to all kinds and permissions on your phone. And I'm not sure that I want a note-taking app to have access to the accessibility framework. It's just absolutely stupid. So I'm glad Google is back on it. And most especially also about those guys that leave apps there for years and years unattended, becoming abandonware. Google's going to remove that crap out of the Play Store if you're not attending to it. So I think it's a win-win situation for all of us, and most especially those of us who like Android.
Yeah, so I sort of agree with you on the former. I fundamentally disagree with you on the latter, but we can come to that in a minute. So what do you think about an app like Taster then? Should that have accessibility permissions? Because that does some quite clever automation, doesn't it? But it's not an accessibility service. Taster, accessibility permissions or not?
They're accessibility oriented. They help people speed things up. So I think you could make a case for that, even though it's technically speaking not an accessibility app.
That's not why it was brought in, though, was it, Anna? I mean, it's an app for everybody, isn't it? I mean,
it's an app for everybody. And Google does have a form that you can fill and explain why your app needs that, in order to function. And you have to make a case for it. But see, there's too many apps out there asking for that accessibility or wanting to say, hey, I want to have access to it. And when in reality, they have nothing to do with it. But if it's something that is useful and surely does need that for sure, Google is going to make an excuse for that. It's not a blanket thing, but we need to be careful which ones we allow if they truly need that access to the accessibility framework.
Might it be then that the accessibility framework is misnamed? Because what we actually want is good apps to have access, don't we? Even if they're not performing an accessibility function, some of the apps that allow you to button map different functions on your phone, I think, want access to the accessibility framework. And while we might use them as accessibility functions, other people might use them as, productivity things. So if Google purely view it through a lens of accessibility, is that going to pose as a problem with some of those apps like Taster, like the button mappers that aren't strictly speaking accessibility, but which deliver that extra functionality?
Like I said, though, I think these people would have to make a case for it. And I give you an example of this type of behavior. I have e-reader Prestigio, and for some reason, it needs accessibility. And you know what? I don't even have it on there. Guess what? It's now showing in my TTS engines as a TTS engine, and it's not. And so if I tap on that by mistake, I am toast.
Yeah, that's fair enough. The other one, though, the needing to keep your apps up to date, that does annoy me a little bit. I mean, surely you need to update an app when you need to update an app. That should be the test, not whether or not an app was updated within X months. I mean, I know people
that... A lot of times an app gets updated as the... So, when we have system updates, like from Android 11 to Android 12, some things need a little tweaking. So I don't think it needs to be a massive update. But like I'm thinking about Google's remote control app for its TV. That is a piece of junk. Oh my gosh, it's totally inaccessible. It's about 3 years old and it's never been worked on. And I'm thinking, let's just either fix that or get rid of it because, it's just been floating around doing nothing.
But that would be my test, Anna, whether the app still works or not. Because plenty of apps don't need to be updated because the operating system's changed. Eloquence is still muddling along. If we move away from Android to Windows, I know people still using DOS programs from the 90s because the command line works and the programs do what they want. I would have thought a multi-billion tech corporation like Google could have thought of a more sophisticated way to test whether Play Store apps work. And if not, they could allow users to report them rather than saying, your app hasn't been updated in X months, therefore we're going to pull it.
Well, Ed, if we go down that road, then we might as well still be using, that DOS instead and be staying back there. But the whole point is you put in an app, back in 2012 and you never revisited that app. Now, to me, that has become an abandonware, and I don't care who uses it or who doesn't use it. Google is saying if you are not attending to it, at least you sign into it every 90 days or whatever. If you don't, then we're going to remove your account and scrap your account. And I think I agree with Google on this one because we don't have all these things cluttering the Play Store and all, junk apps. Excuse my Espanol. I'm the app junkie, and I see some of my apps that don't work with my recent Android versions anymore. And so it's absolutely silly. Keep this thing floating.
So that would be my test, whether the app works or not when the app was last updated, because the app might be perfectly happy.
Yeah, but there are security holes. These apps are security holes. You're not complying with the security that's going on. You're just introducing problems to the OS, and I'm with Google on this one.
Yeah. And that depends what the app does, though, doesn't it? I mean, that's going to be, if it's a keyboard, that's a really big risk. If it's not, if it has no permissions, if it just beetles away and pulls down some sort of feed from the net to give you some scores, not particularly.
Oh, that's a huge security hole there because, these Android apps that are not being updated and taking advantage of the security things as a problem. And we see that over and over again. We don't need to revisit these stories, do we?
Well, looking at a slightly different angle, Google could actually be implementing this to protect the app developers, because as we've seen within the Telegram group, there's been cracked versions of applications being handed out. It's by basically eliminating them after a certain amount of time of what I'd consider dead time from the developer, and they disappear from the Play Store. That's actually then technically protecting the intellectual property of the app developers. So we could be seeing a bit of that underlying protection from Google, which I think would actually be beneficial, because then we'd see a lot less cracked apps being floated around the internet, and potentially in some cases, as I've actually came across in the last few days, stolen apps.
Well, so see, they're not taking advantage of the newer mechanisms to protect their apps, because it's back from those days when it's the Wild West and you could grab any app and just make it available to anybody, whether it's paid or not. It doesn't have or know how to check the Play Store for licensing and all of that. And that's why we have this type of apps getting pirated. And so this is actually a win-win situation to all of us. We have better apps, and then, makes people to update their stuff to the 64-bit, as to the 32-bit and all of that. And, I don't care if your app is 64-bit or 32-bit, as long as it works. But by golly, update that app. Make it secure. Don't be taking advantage, opening my thing up there for any knucklehead to get hold of my stuff. I'm not going to be with you. I'm very hot on this one.
I can tell.
Yeah. If an app ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's a security risk, pull it. If it isn't, don't. Google needs to get smarter.
Well, say. Google has the big axe, and we're going to axe them out. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sledgehammer to crack a nut, but there we are. And when Doug spoke about Telegram group, he was not speaking about blind Android users. We do not tolerate cracked apps, and should they be posted, they get pulled. Don't they, Austin?
Yeah, they get pulled within minutes. So no one even
Mainly because I
downloads their
go,
app.
Austin, pull that bloody
Yeah,
app.
pull that app. Yeah. But one of the sad news about this is that we lose a lot of apps like Get There. We lose like Dice World unless they update it somehow. KNFB Reader, all those apps will go.
Yes, even though they're perfectly
why are you saying
functional.
we'll lose Get There? You don't know that the guy is not going to update his app, Austin. How do you know?
I'm saying as of now, we'll lose the Get There.
No,
He's basically on
we're
track
not going
record,
to
I think,
lose it.
Warren.
Yeah.
He's basically
I'm
on track
basically on track
record, like
record.
it hasn't been updated in years.
Yeah.
Well, the last time Get There was updated was 2019. I mean, I have apps from 2012, guys, that have not been updated. Now, I'm not kidding. Now tell me, what kind of behavior that is?
Depends on the app. Depends what the app does. It might not need updating. They broke, they can fix it. Mind you, as we were about to hear, K9 Mail has washed its face and combed its hair and tucked its shirt in, hasn't it, in a bit?
And
so that has updated itself
that's the
after
one I'm
3
going to be
years.
talking about in our email client that, saw the light, and now we have a beautiful email client.
Yes. Doesn't it look a Bobby Dazzler? Anyway. Yes. That will, whatever we think about it, and as if you heard, a range of diverse views. Those changes are being introduced by Google, cracking down on apps which can exploit the accessibility service, and apps which don't update themselves will be pulled.
All I can say is go, Google, go. I'm behind you guys.
You certainly are.